My cousin Ronald was dragged into court over our family business. The false accusations nearly destroyed him. So this all blew up just last month, and I'm still shaking every time I think about it. For context, my cousin Ronald 18M is basically like a little brother to me. Our families have always been tangled up in this weird, half-functional family business that's been around forever. It started with my gran for the small construction company, then got passed down to my uncle George, Ronald's dad, on my mum's side. Everyone works there in some way. Here's where the drama kicks in. Ronald just graduated high school, and instead of going off to college right away, he decided to help out in the company. He's young, but he's smart. He handles a lot of paperwork, contracts, even some bookkeeping under supervision. Problem is, some of my uncles don't take him seriously because of his age. Well, fast forward to 3 weeks ago. I get a text from Ronald at like 7 AM. Bro, they're saying I stole from the company. They want me in court. At first I thought he was joking. But no. Apparently, Uncle George's older brother, Uncle Peter, who's basically the self-appointed watchdog of the business, claimed Ronald forged signatures on contracts and skinned money from accounts. Totally insane, because Ronald doesn't even have full access to accounts. So the whole thing escalated, and next thing I know we're all at the courthouse downtown. The building felt cold as hell, like the walls themselves were judging us. Ronald sat next to me in a cheap suit that looked 2 sizes too big, his knee bouncing non-stop. His mom, my Aunt Lisa, was red-eyed from crying, whispering, "They're trying to ruin him, I swear. They're trying to ruin my boy." Meanwhile, Peter strutted in with the smug face, carrying folders like he was the damn prosecutor himself. He kept glaring at Ronald, shaking his head like, "You're finished." The hearing wasn't even a full trial, more like a preliminary to see if there was evidence worth pursuing. But the way the lawyer spoke, you'd think Ronald was some career conman. They said things like, "We have strong reason to believe this young man engaged in fraudulent activities, damaging the company's reputation and finances." At one point, Ronald whispered to me, voice cracking, "I swear I didn't do this. They are making it up. Why would they come after me?" And honestly, I didn't know what to say. Because deep down, I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power. Uncle Peter never liked the idea of Ronald being involved. He thought Ronald was too young, too soft, and probably wanted to push him out before he could have any influence. The scariest moment was when they pulled out a contract with Ronald's name on it. His signature was there in blue ink. My heart dropped. For a split second, even I wondered, could he have messed up? But then I looked at Ronald pale, shaking, on the verge of tears, and I knew. Someone had set him up. That's when things got ugly. Aunt Lisa stood up and screamed at Peter in the middle of the courtroom. "You forged that yourself. You've been out to get my son since the day he started working with you." The judge had to bang the gavel to quiet everyone down. But the damage was done. Our whole family drama was now playing out in public in front of strangers under fluorescent courthouse light. And trust me, that was just the beginning. After that first hearing, things didn't calm down. They blew up even worse. The judge scheduled a follow-up session for the following week, which basically gave our family 7 days to rip itself apart. Ronald went home that day completely crushed. I remember driving him back. He was just staring out the window, whispering, "They actually believe I do that, my own family." And it broke me, because Ronald is the kind of kid who still holds doors open for strangers and apologizes when you bump into him. The idea of him stealing was laughable, but Uncle Peter wasn't letting it go. Guy started running his mouth to anyone in the family who'd listen. At the Sunday dinner, he pulled out copies of those forged contracts like he was passing around a menu. He kept repeating, "Look at this, that's Ronald's signature. He's sinking the company. If we don't act now, he'll drag us all down." I swear, he was enjoying it. The worst part, some family members actually nodded along. My Aunt Carol, the type who thrives on drama, muttered, "Well, maybe Ronald shouldn't have been given so much responsibility at his age." Ronald just sat there silently, pushing peas around his plate. At one point he looked up and said softly, "You guys really think I'd do this?" And the silence that followed was louder than any accusation. Behind the scenes, Aunt Lisa was on fire. She cornered me in the kitchen, whispering so fast I could barely keep up. "Peter's lying. I know he is. He's been jealous of George ever since Dad left the company to him instead of splitting it evenly. He's using Ronald as a pawn to punish George." Honestly, it made sense. Uncle Peter's always been bitter. He wanted control of the business, but Grandpa trusted George more. And now, with Ronald stepping in, Peter probably saw his last chance slipping away. The week leading up to the second court date felt like walking on glass. Ronald stayed up late every night with his dad, digging through records, contracts, bank statements. One night I got a text from him at 2 AM. "Found something, dates don't match, Peter screwed up." When I asked what he meant, he sent me a blurry photo of a contract that supposedly had Ronald's signature on it, but the date stamped on the document was from last year. Ronald hadn't even started working with contracts until this summer. That gave us a shred of hope. But we knew Peter wouldn't go down easy. He's the type who burned the whole house down just to be right. On the morning of the second hearing, the courthouse felt even heavier than the first. Ronald looked more determined though. His cheap suit was pressed, his hair slicked back, and he held a folder stuffed with documents like a shield. Before walking in, he looked at me and said, "If I don't clear my name today, I'm done. I'll never forgive them." And the way his voice shook, it scared me. Because I realized this wasn't just about proving innocence anymore. It was about survival. Inside, Uncle Peter was already waiting with that smug smile, like he thought he'd won. But when Ronald handed over his folder to the judge, that smile flickered. Something was about to explode. The second hearing started, and the tension in the courtroom was suffocating. I could see Ronald gripping his folder so tightly his knuckles were white. Aunt Lisa sat behind him, praying under her breath, while Uncle Peter leaned back with that same smug expression like he already had the victory in the bag. The judge called the session to order. Peter's lawyer launched immediately into his spiel, waving the evidence around like a trophy. "Your Honour, we have proof that Ronald forged signatures on multiple contracts, resulting in substantial financial discrepancies. It's clear he acted with intent to defraud the company." Ronald's lawyer, a young but sharp woman named Ms. Carter, didn't even flinch. She leaned forward and calmly said, "Your Honour, we have documentation proving these accusations are factually impossible." Then came the bombshell. Ronald stood up, voice steady but shaking underneath. Your Honour, I didn't do this. I've worked here all summer, and I only had access to some documents. The signatures they're showing were backdated, and here are the contracts with timestamps that prove it. He handed over the folder, and I swear, you could hear a pin drop. The contracts clearly had digital timestamps that predated Ronald's employment. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Peter's smug grin faltered. He whispered frantically to his lawyer, but the lawyer just shook his head. Ronald continued. I think someone's trying to frame me to take me out of the company. My dad knows, my aunt knows they can vouch for my work and my schedule. Then Aunt Lisa stood up, pointing at Peter. It was you, Peter. You've been bitter about George running the business, and you used my son to try to get control. I know you forged those contracts. There was a collective gasp in the courtroom. Peter's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Einar, that's you lying. The judge held up a hand. Quiet, please. I will review these documents and statements before making any decisions. Even though the judge didn't give an immediate verdict, the room's energy shifted. The tide had turned. Peter kept muttering under his breath, looking like the confident man we all knew was now floundering. After the hearing, Ronald was shaking, but there was a mix of relief and fury on his face. Outside the courthouse, I asked him, how do you feel? He took a deep breath, tears threatening, and said, like I survived a storm, but also like I want to make sure Peter pays for this. I don't care what it takes. Aunt Lisa hugged him tightly. You cleared your name, baby. That's what matters. We'll deal with him later. It wasn't over yet. Peter wasn't going to just roll over, but for the first time, Ronald had evidence, support, and a court that at least seemed to be taking him seriously. As we walked back to the car, I realised how deep this family drama ran. Money, power, jealousy, it all got tangled up in our lives. And poor Ronald, barely 18, had been dragged into the mess. But for now, he was standing tall, ready to fight, and not just for himself, but for the family that actually wanted to protect him. The days after the second hearing were tense. Even though Ronald had handed over proof that the accusations were impossible, Uncle Peter refused to back down. He started whispering to other relatives, trying to sow doubt, and even went so far as to extend his show up at the office, glaring at Ronald every time he passed. One morning, Ronald called me in a panic. He cornered me in the storage room, said I'd regret proving him wrong. I grabbed my keys, rushed over, and when I arrived, Ronald was pacing, pale and shaking. Aunt Lisa followed close behind, holding her phone like she was ready to dial 911. We cornered Peter in the parking lot. He looked like he just stepped out of a drama movie, hands on his hips, chest puffed out. So, you're finally trying to act all innocent, he sneered. Think the judge can protect you? Think your little files can save you from the real world? Ronald, surprisingly, didn't back down. I didn't do anything wrong. They're the one trying to ruin me to take control of the company. Peter laughed, a low, cold sound. You have no idea what's coming, kid. You're too naive. This family doesn't protect the weak. That line made my blood boil. Aunt Lisa stepped forward, fist clenched. He's not weak, you're pathetic, Peter. Using a child to satisfy your ego. Everyone knows what you're doing. Peter sneered but didn't respond. He turned and walked to his car like the confrontation didn't matter. But we all knew this wasn't over. The tension was palpable. Ronald's hands were still trembling, but there was fire in his eyes, a mix of fear, anger, and determination. Later that evening, we sat around the kitchen table, going over everything. Ronald spread out all the documents, contracts, timestamps, and email records. If he tries anything else, we're ready. Everything is documented now. He can't lie in court without being caught. Aunt Lisa nodded, rubbing her temples. I just can't believe it came to this. He practically grew up thinking his family was close, and suddenly it's like a war zone. I leaned back, trying to process everything. Honestly, I felt a mix of admiration and worry for Ronald. At 18, he was now facing the kind of manipulation and betrayal most adults struggle with. But he wasn't cowering. We all agreed that the next step was to let the legal process play out and gather as much evidence as possible. Ronald had lawyers' timestamps and witness statements ready. Peter might think he had power, but every time he made a move, Ronald's team caught it. That night, as Ronald went to bed, he texted me. I don't know how long this will last, but I'm not going down, not like this. And I realised that no matter what happened next, this was the moment Ronald stopped being just a kid. He was standing up for himself, ready to fight back against family betrayal and false accusations. The courthouse battle was far from over, and tensions were only rising, but for the first time, Ronald had control, and Peter was no longer untouchable. The day of the big courtroom showdown arrived, and the air in the courthouse felt almost electric. Word had spread through the family, and half of them showed up, whispering and casting sidelong glances. Ronald sat at the defence table, looking calmer than I expected, but I could see his fingers twitching as he clutched the folder of evidence. Peter entered with his usual arrogance, flanked by his lawyer. He glanced at Ronald, eyes narrowing, like he still believed intimidation could work. The judge called the session to order, and it began with Peter's lawyer laying out the same accusations that had started this nightmare. But this time, Ronald's side was ready for the full confrontation. Yes, Carter. Ronald's lawyer opened with a clear, confident statement. Your Honour, the evidence presented by Mr. Peter is not only misleading but deliberately falsified. We have records that directly contradict the claims made. Then came the bombshell. Ronald was asked to testify. He stood, voice steady, and looked directly at the judge. I didn't forge anything. The signatures they're showing aren't mine, and the dates on these contracts predate my employment. My Uncle Peter backdated documents to make it look like I was trying to steal money. Peter sputtered, trying to interrupt, but the judge banged the gavel. Order. Let the witness speak. Ronald continued, presenting timestamps, emails, and even surveillance records from the office showing he wasn't even near the document when the forgeries occurred. He then calmly explained the motive behind Peter's actions, jealousy over company control and bitterness from family resentment. Aunt Lisa stood up as a witness, confirming everything Ronald had said. Peter had been trying to take over this business for years. He resents George and has been targeting Ronald to weaken our side of the family. I have proof he manipulated documents to frame my son. The courtroom murmured, and Peter's face went pale. He whispered to his lawyer frantically, but nothing could stop the tide. The judge reviewed the evidence and finally spoke. Based on the documentation and testimony provided, the court finds no credible evidence of wrongdoing by Ronald. The claims appear to be falsified and malicious in nature. Peter tried to protest, but the gavel came down again. Silence filled the room. Ronald exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. Tears started forming at the corners of his eyes as Aunt Lisa hugged him. Even I couldn't stop myself from feeling a surge of pride. My 18-year-old cousin had stood up to a family member who tried to destroy him and came out on top. Peter left the courtroom, still muttering, but defeated. For now, he wouldn't dare touch Ronald again, at least not without risking legal consequences. As we walked out into the sunlight, Ronald turned to me and said, "I can't believe this is over, but I feel like I can finally breathe." I nodded, clapping him on the back. "You earned this, you didn't just survive, you proved yourself, and trust me, no one's going to mess with you again." For the first time in weeks, the family felt like it could start healing. The damage from Peter's betrayal would take time, but Ronald had reclaimed his name, his dignity, and his place in the family business. The days after the courtroom victory felt surreal. Ronald finally had a sense of relief, but the family dynamics were still fragile. Everyone was walking on eggshells around Peter, who refused to speak to most of us. He stayed away from the office and family gatherings, sulking like a king dethroned. At home, Aunt Lisa tried to rebuild a sense of normalcy for Ronald. She kept telling him, "You proved them wrong, baby, never let anyone make you doubt yourself again." Ronald nodded but was quieter than usual, still processing everything. He'd been through so much in a matter of weeks: false accusations, public humiliation, and the looming threat of losing his future in the family business. I sat down with him one afternoon while he was organising the office files he'd rescued from Peter's manipulations. "You know," I said, "I've never seen anyone your age handle something like this. Most adults would have crumbled." He smiled faintly, not looking up from his papers. I couldn't let him win. It's our family, and I wasn't going to let one person destroy it for everyone else. That was the moment I realised how much Ronald had grown. He wasn't just a kid anymore, he was someone capable of standing up for himself, someone who could fight for what's right without losing sight of the bigger picture. Peter, predictably, tried to stir tension later. He sent passive-aggressive emails hinting at unfinished business and questions about company oversight. But thanks to Ronald's meticulous record-keeping and our lawyer, nothing stuck. Every attempt to undermine Ronald was shut down. Even Uncle George, who had been hesitant to support his son fully at first, finally recognised Ronald's intelligence and maturity. Family dinners became a little less tense. Some relatives who had doubted Ronald apologised, albeit awkwardly. Aunt Lisa made sure he felt celebrated but not coddled. And Ronald himself seemed to carry a new confidence, knowing he could defend himself if needed. One evening, I asked him if he felt angry about everything Peter did. "Of course," he admitted. "But I'm more determined than angry. I want to make sure this family business survives, and I want to be a part of it, not just a victim of its politics." And that was the shift. Ronald's innocence had been tested, and he came out stronger, sharper, and more aware of the family's complexities. He learned that trust wasn't blind, and power struggles could hide behind familiar faces. But he also learned that courage, preparation, and evidence could defeat lies. The story wasn't just about Ronald surviving false accusations, it was about growing up overnight, navigating betrayal, and proving that even at 18, he could command respect and protect himself. And as I watched him plan the next steps for the business with Uncle George, I knew one thing for sure: Ronald wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving. By the time the dust settled, our family had changed in ways we didn't fully expect. Ronald's victory in court became a kind of turning point, not just for him, but for everyone watching. The rumour mill slowed, Peter retreated, and the family business, while bruised, started functioning more smoothly. Ronald himself had changed the most. The quiet, anxious kid who had been dragged into the courthouse now carried himself with a subtle confidence. He still had moments of vulnerability, of course, but they were tempered with a sharp awareness of how to protect himself. Aunt Lisa often told him, "You've grown so much in just a few weeks. I'm proud of you, Ronald." Ronald smiled, shrugging. "I just didn't want them to win. I wanted to prove the truth mattered." And the truth did matter. Follow-up investigation revealed more of Peter's manipulations. While he hadn't committed anything criminal beyond forgery attempts within internal documents, the family now viewed him with wariness. He couldn't simply bully his way through the business anymore. Ronald had established that even the youngest members could wield accountability. The aftermath also strengthened bonds with other family members. George, Ronald's dad, became more supportive, giving him bigger responsibilities and openly praising his contributions. Even Aunt Carol, who had initially questioned Ronald's abilities, apologised quietly and admitted she had underestimated him. One afternoon, we sat together in the office reviewing new contracts. Ronald was meticulous, pointing out potential pitfalls and explaining strategies to prevent future manipulation. Watching him work, I realised this experience had made him not just mature but strategic. He turned to me and said softly, "I hope this is over, but if it's not, at least I know I can handle it." I nodded. "You proved you could, cousin. Nobody can throw you under the bus now." And yet, the story left its mark on all of us. Peter's betrayal reminded the family that power struggles could hide behind familiar faces and that loyalty isn't automatic. But it also proved that courage, preparation, and truth could win out even against manipulation and false accusations. In hindsight, the whole ordeal was brutal, unfair, and emotionally draining. But it also became a defining moment for Ronald, shaping him into someone resilient, perceptive, and strong. He wasn't just a kid dragged into a courthouse by lies anymore. He was a fighter, someone who could defend his name, stand up to betrayal, and come out with dignity intact. As we left the office that evening, Ronald paused at the door, looking back with a half-smile. "I guess this is just the beginning, but I feel ready for anything now." And I knew he was right. Ronald's innocence had been tested, his family loyalty questioned, and his courage pushed to its limits. But through it all, he emerged stronger, and that strength would carry him through whatever came next: family drama, business battles, or life itself. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving, and no one could take that away from him.